We're here.
May I introduce our moderator, Brigadier General Retired Ed McElhenney, who will introduce our other distinguished guest. Thank you guys for all being here. Enjoy the show. I know I will.
Thank you, Connie.
Connie.
Go ahead, Ron. You're in the second chair. I'll be in the first chair, and the rest of you guys fill in the gap. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special Warbirds in Review. This is a very unique Warbirds in Review. We've got a couple beautiful, beautiful airplanes here and some very distinguished pilots, historians, artists along with us here. The flow of things today is going to be, we're going to talk a little bit about the P-47 over here first. We've got Evan and Chad who are going to be doing that, and then we're going to get to the meat of the mission, so to speak, and we're going to talk about this beautiful airplane over here that just arrived. When did you land, Ray? 7 o'clock last night?
Last night.
Yeah, okay. So it just got here. All right, quick introductions. That museum piece that you just saw, where's Diane? Diane, yeah, she's one half of the team right there. The other half of the team sits right there. That's Ron Fagen. He's the guy who, between he and Diane, make that happen. And I am privileged to be able to talk to Ron today. So, yeah, thank you so much for being here, Ron, and also thank you for preserving the heritage and doing what you do with that museum. If you ever get a chance, you need to go there. I think it rivals the Smithsonian as far as I'm concerned, and I've been there many times myself. Next is son Evan, and Evan, again, chief pilot as he was introduced there, but he flies them all, and as you saw in the video, hey, they got a lot of flyable airplanes up there, and he's going to be talking a little bit about the P-47 here. Next, we got Brandon Duell, and I should just introduce him as our savior because he's the guy who made this happen today. If it wasn't for Brandon, that airplane would probably still be sitting in a hangar up in Granite Falls. Am I correct? Yeah. He just nods his head. And we'll get into more details there later. Chad Hill, he's our artist and historian, and he'll be talking a little bit about the P-47. And then, what's that guy's name down at the end? No, can I take the microphone? We don't need to talk to him. No, that is Ray Fowler. I'll say premier warbird pilot extraordinaire. We've known each other for years now, flown with him many times. Let's see, brief history. Let's see, guard guy, F-16s, airline guy, and I've lost track of how many Warbirds he's flown, but he's the guy who flew it in here yesterday, so we need to say special thanks. Oh, and one other thing, he's well, not quite. He's almost our newest F-35 pilot also. Ray's got another, how many rides? You got 4 rides left in the program.
I'm not there yet. 4 more to go.
Yeah, so he could bust out. There's no telling, but yeah. So he's about to be an F-35 pilot with the Montgomery Air National Guard down there, and he'll be talking a little bit about flying that thing in. But I'll start first with Ron and just say, hey, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the museum, and thank you so much for what you do for our country. These guys are all patriots, and I hope we can continue this, hey, in years and years to come, and I think we will. But I'll stop real quick and get into, I don't know, if we should talk first with Ron. Yeah, and just talk about acquisition of this particular aircraft and that one there too. So just talk about how you got those things, and then we'll get into the P-47 and then back to the SB-2C.
Okay, Ed. Well, the Helldiver here was interesting. I was kind of busy at the time, and we all look at Trade a Plane, right? And I was looking through Trade a Plane. It says, buy probably the second only airplane to be ever airworthy again in a restoration, and it says easy restoration, most parts. Bought it sight unseen, and after I committed and made the commitment, then I called up Joe DeNett and Mark, because they were in Pennsylvania. The airplane was in Virginia. Would you guys go see what I bought? And
what year was that, by the way?
Oh my, 2006.
Okay.
Yep. And Joe and Mark, they said, well, the good thing about it, it's where its location is it's basically corrosion free. And most of a lot of these aircraft in the South Pacific, the salt water has really raised havoc on them. And so he says, but I think you did all right. And a little bit about the airplane. It was only a week old when it crashed, and the pilot and his rear gunner went out, still in the pattern, and they had engine problems, and the engine quit, and they come around and landed at the air base there, and went off the end of the runway and ended up in the trees, and that's where it sat for a lot of years. And then somehow the Smithsonian got ownership of it. And then somewhere along the line, they traded it for parts they needed for a bomber they're working on, and it went to the individual we bought it from. So that was 2006, and we hauled it. And if you can look at the boards over here when you put the airplane back, you can see what it looked like after the crash. It was that the picture's there, and then we had probably 2 huge containers full of the rest of the parts that kind of fell off it, and engine and everything. And so 2006, took the fuselage to Kansas and started on restoring the shell of the fuselage, and then the center sections and the outer wings went to Tri-State Aviation in Wahpeton, North Dakota. And my direction to them was use every part you possibly can and salvage to put back in the rebuild. And there was some annealing, some reheat treating, and they did a good job. And then whatever we couldn't reuse, it had to machine new. And I'm telling too much. That's in the Brandon stuff.
Yep.
But anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, that's how we got it.
All right. Thank you. All right. And we'll get into now the P-47 and the expert. Well, like I said, we're going to be talking to Chad and Evan about that thing. So Chad, go ahead and talk about that. He's the guy who painted. You talk about some beautiful nose art, by the way. Take a look at that. That is absolutely gorgeous. And that's just a piece of his artwork. He's done many other Warbirds, by the way. But Chad, go ahead and give us a little bit of a history of that airplane and that artwork and where that came from.
So when the Fagens got the P-47, there was a picture posted on Facebook, and I immediately sent a text to Evan. I'm like, do you have something to ask me or to tell me? He said, yeah, because they weren't happy with what the nose art was that was on it, and they were looking for something else. And as it turns out, there was a P-47 pilot that lived, like 30 miles from them in Ortonville, Minnesota, which they didn't know. Nobody knew about this gentleman. So we decided to honor a local veteran to the Fagen Museum. And so this plane is painted up in the markings of the 405th Fighter Group, the 509th Fighter Squadron, and in particular the markings of Lieutenant Dwayne Buchholz. Dwayne joined the 405th in September of 44 and flew with them through May of 45, all throughout the rest of the war. He flew in the Battle of the Bulge. He flew 72 combat missions, 168 and a half combat hours. He received the DFC and also the Air Medal with 9 oak leaf clusters. The nose art, he asked one of the gentlemen in the squadron, Eli Gutierrez, to paint an Indian head on there. And Eli said, I'm from Boston, I don't know what an Indian looks like. So Dwayne gave him a nickel and said, here, match this. So that's what Eli did. And for whatever reason, Eli didn't want to paint the name on there, so Dwayne himself painted Chief Sky-U-Ma on the first aircraft that he had. Of course, this one is the second. There were lots of photos of the first aircraft, but only one photo of number 2. And it was that photo stopped like right here. So we didn't know what the rest of it looked like, right? And there's a lot of model kits of this plane, and every one of them's different on the markings and the lettering and the nose art. So I did some research. I contacted Michael Tetra, who was one of his squadron mates. His great nephew had a lot of research on the group and on Dwayne. And so we were able to determine that Dwayne himself had approved one particular set of decals. So that's the lettering style that we chose to use on the airplane. And if Dwayne approved it, that's good enough for me.
All right, thank you. And let's get into Evan a little bit here. Oh, didn't want to lose that. And you got a lot of time in the airplane, don't you? You've flown it kind of all over the place. So you just came from an air show, in fact. Didn't you just take it down to an air show just recently?
Well, a few weeks ago, Ray and I went to St. Louis, but I think I got about 20 hours total so far, so not a ton.
All right, talk a little bit about the air. You know, it's kind of an unsung hero of sorts. You know, the glory airplanes. You know, is that P-51 thing sitting over there. But you know, this thing was a workhorse. This thing did a little bit of everything. Hey, it was pretty good air to air. It dropped a lot of bombs. It was a surface attack airplane. What kind of armament? You know, you can take a look. Is that, you know, hey, four machines going on either side?
Yeah, it's got 4 on each side, 8 M2 50 caliber Browning machine guns, and it had 3,400 rounds total. It could carry up to 2,500 pounds of bombs, and then up to 10 rockets. So it had a lot of firepower, and you know, they compare this to the A-10 now, as far as a good ground attack airplane. Flying it, you know, it's this airplane here. When you take off, it loves this. You know, it stays on the ground for a long time. And it climbs slow, but it's a nice flying airplane. They dive really fast. You know, it's got a R2800-59, which is, you know, the 2800s in the Corsair and the Hellcat. And those 3 airplanes, they don't sound alike. You know, they all sound different. But it's 18 cylinders, got 2,000 horsepower. It's got a lot of power. And I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this had the fastest recorded speed in World War II in a dive. And so, I mean, they're fast airplanes, but they could pack a punch. And I think in World War II, they learned that they were really good for killing tanks and locomotives and supporting the troops. So it did a lot of ground support missions.
Yeah, you know, I mean, what was the name of this airplane? The Thunderbolt, right?
Thunderbolt.
The P-47 Thunderbolt. Well, guess what? You know, the Air Force thought so highly of it that I don't know how many years later, what do? They name another one called the Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt II of the A-10. And basically the same kind of mission. Primarily a ground attack, same thing, killing tanks and everything. Had a little different cannon in it, of course. But yeah, so great airplane, great reputation. And yeah, it was an airplane. You point it to ground, it's going to go. And a neat airplane. And it was so nice to have it decorated like this too, Chad. So thank you very much.
And the 405th Bomb Group, or Fighter Group, you know, they're 9th Air Force. They didn't get all the glory that a lot of the 8th Air Force guys did. There were no aces in the 405th. In fact, their highest kill ratio pilot was 4 kills. Mm-hmm. So they really did a lot of the hard and dirty work throughout the Battle of the Bulge, which is what we have on the T-shirt, the Battle of the Bulge. You know, because they really helped the infantry out and made life much easier for them.
Yeah, and if you look at it, you know, everybody thinks that it's a big airplane. Well, guess what? That's a big airplane over there. There's you know, really, if you take a look at the P-47 compared to, hey, the Spitfire, the P-51, et cetera, you kind of go, wow, hey, that's a pretty big fighter. Then you come to this thing. And so I'm going to get to this thing now and say, okay, we talked a little bit about the acquisition of it, but now let's talk a little bit about the restoration of it. And our expert is this guy sitting right here named Brandon. And as I've already said, if it wasn't for him, this airplane wouldn't be here today. So, Brandon.
Add on that, too. You know, our crew at the shop, I mean, those guys, especially in the last couple months, have just been pounding out parts and putting in the hours. And without all those guys, and even Evan and Ron and Ray, it wouldn't be here. You know, it just, the guys were putting in way more hours than I could have ever imagined, and it's just really great to have it here, and it's because of all of them.
Yeah, it's a team. There's no question, and a lot of long days, and it culminated with, I wish I could show you the picture of Ray's test flight. I guess, was it yesterday? I guess there was one there of just round and round and round. And the airplane's got a total of how many hours on it right now?
So total is right at 7 hours on the airplane, and we had to stay home station for the first 5 hours. So much of that is just staying over the field, and I'm like, watching that slowly click off so we could start our track eastbound and have it sitting here on the plaza today. So it's just, like I said, a lot of miracles came together to get it here.
Yep. Well, I thank you for bringing it here, but Brandon, come on, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the specifics. It's called an SB2C, and a quick story there. It didn't have a great reputation when it was first designed. It's a Curtiss airplane, and you got Helldivers and Hellcats and rather Hellcats and Wildcats and Mustangs and all. My dad used to work on a variety of the Navy airplanes. He was an aviation machinist mate, still World War II veteran. He's still alive at 101. I asked him about this airplane. I said, had you ever worked on this before? And he's thinking about it, and he says, well, I worked on the Corsair, I worked on the Wildcat, I worked on the Hellcat. And I gave him the number. The number designation of this is the SB2C. And then as soon as I said that, he goes, oh, yeah, we called that the son of a bitch second class. 101 years old, and that's what he comes up. And no kidding, if you look it up in Wikipedia now, hey, there it is. It says son of a bitch second class. So it didn't start out with a great reputation. But go ahead, let's go into the restoration process and some of the stuff that you had to put up with when it was first acquired.
Okay, well, one of the biggest things with the Helldiver is that there's just one out there. There's not a lot of reference, and so we're doing a lot of stuff.
There's one other one out there. This is the second one, by the way.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff we're doing, we're relying on the prints or manuals or whatever we can acquire from the Smithsonian. And the problem was there's a lot of prints, but not all of them are real clear. So it's one of those things where you end up figuring stuff out as you go. And we have those prints too, but there's no assembly manual. So you don't want to trap yourself as you're building it. So it's just a slow process that you have to work through. And it took a lot of time.
The airplane was designed, by the way, the Navy needed another dive bomber, basically. And they had, the TBM, and that came a little bit before this, Dauntless, but they said, hey, we needed something better. So they designed this thing, and it's purely a Navy airplane. You can see it's got a tail hook back there. The wings do fold. We didn't fold them today because the dive brakes are out, right?
Yep.
But the wings do fold indeed, put them on a carrier and all that stuff. But when it was first designed, it really had some very poor handling characteristics. And Curtis sat there and scratched her head and said, okay, we can fix it, right?
Yeah. And they had a lot of changes during production, improving the model. And really, the first two prototypes, I think, pulled apart in the air. And so they had some real issues. And the rudder and the elevators, they added ribs to. The ailerons, they added gap seals, which improved the performance of the ailerons. A lot of different things. There's a stiffener band going around the fuselage because on initial testing, when they were doing hook landings, they'd actually pull the fuselage apart. And so they added a beefier piece of aluminum around the fuselage right in the gunner area. Mm-hmm. So.
And speak of that, you say gun area. It's a crew of two, and hey, what normally goes in the back there?
So in the back end, you had a whole bunch of radios. He was a gunner and a navigator, and so you had all the radios. And then he'd also have a twin 30 caliber machine gun, and that's on a turret, so he can swivel with the gun. And there's no interrupter in the turret, so if he shoots through the tail, they'll be patching holes when he gets back to the ship.
All right. And how about externally? There's some 5-inch rockets out here. Was it primarily a torpedo bomber, or would it drop anything and everything?
So the Helldiver, really, it was initially a dive bomber.
Okay.
And then, like any military aircraft, they just throw stuff on it and see if it works. And the Helldiver ended up being able to have the rockets on, 2,000-pound bomb in the bomb bay, 500-pound bomb on each wing, I believe it was. It also had 20-millimeter cannon in each wing. It really had a lot of firepower. And so late in the war, when they were doing the island hopping campaigns, it really did a lot of damage and helped them really advance the troops on the ground. And so for that, it really kind of dropped its dive bombing role and turned into more of a ground attack aircraft.
All right, how about, some of the varieties of aerodynamics here? I look at this and I see a leading edge slat there. Is that, the F-16s, our leading edge slats would come out automatically while we're maneuvering. It's out now, so did it go back in?
Yeah, so with the slat system, so being a Curtiss aircraft, Curtiss tended to design things really overly designed it, I guess. And everything on this plane is beefy, and the slat system has a whole bunch of quarter-inch cables and a lot of pulleys, and it's really complex. And all those cables and pulleys actually end up tying to the gear up inside here. And so as the gear comes up, the slats get retracted. And when the gear come down, they go out. Pretty solid system. It's not wind load variation or anything like that. But there's a lot going on.
How about dive brakes? Was that typically used in every dive bombing attack?
Yep. The dive brakes. So with the selector in the cockpit, there's forward for dive and aft for landing flaps on the plane. And there's 2 zeros on it. So with the landing flaps, you have 0 to 52 degrees. And with the dive, it's 0 to, I believe, like 35. And the 2 zeros, when you go between them, there's a lock pin that actually says, okay, we're going to dive brakes. So we have to let the landing flap and the upper flap loose. And then the opposite way, when you go landing, it says, okay, let's lock that top flap in and just use the landing flap.
Okay, how about the motor? You said 2,800?
2600,
2600, okay.
20.
All right. And fairly reliable, no big problems?
Yeah. The motor really is. Actually, we first ran the airplane in October, I believe, somewhere around there. And when we started test flying this past week, we decided to start prepping it for test flights. So we pulled the plugs in the cylinders because these planes will get oils drained down into the lower cylinders. And so we pulled the plugs, drained the oil out, and turned the prop over, and hardly any oil came out, which is pretty amazing for one of these planes that's sitting for months and months. Mm-hmm. So,
talk about the prop. The prop's a little bit different. If I go over here and I bang on the prop, it sounds like it's hollow.
Yeah. The prop is really neat. So Curtiss Electric, they have props for a lot of aircraft from World War II, most notably stuff like the P-40s. And those were all aluminum props, or most of them were. Curtiss also did some steel props, but a lot of those they actually contracted out to other companies. And one of the companies was A.O. Smith. And now they still make like conditioning units today. But during the war, they made these steel props. And they actually had their own airfoil shapes. And so, jets come by. They had a custom airfoil shape that they used. And really amazing shape to it. Great sound. And the prop is just really cool. Now, to find the prop, to find a whole bunch of these blades that were only used on one aircraft was a lot of work. We ended up finding, I think, about 12 blades, and the overall shop was able to pull out enough for 2 props, and so we've got two propellers, two sets of propellers. It was really, one of the things with these planes is we try to make them as close to original as possible, and we could have thrown a ham standard on there, but we went through the work to try to find that rare original blade so we could have that original prop set up on the plane. And I'm just really glad we did, because the sound of this prop when Ray's powering it up, takeoff, is just amazing. It really has a neat sound to it, and it's just something that without that, the last person to hear it was in the late 50s, maybe early 50s, you know. So now we can experience that sound that the original plane made.
Okay, how about gross weight? Total gross weight, loaded up with bombs, ready to go, cat launch off the carrier.
So it could, total weight could be up 16,000 pounds, a little over. Empty weight right now, and we're real close, stock weight, is 10,800.
Okay. All right, let's go up to the cockpit. And for the cockpit stuff, I'm going to talk to Ray a little bit. And yeah, Ray, I'm going to first ask, hey, this airplane hadn't flown in I don't know how many years. Just to get authorization to get it to fly. I heard I heard you got a lot of cooperation, but there's a lot in that process. Is that right?
There absolutely is. And first off, I just have to thank Ron and Diane and Evan for just even considering me to be the person to come up and fly this airplane. So what an honor to be involved. And, I've got to do a few of these, and it's always amazing to come in really at the last hour, particularly after what an ambitious restoration, to show up and see it all come together and basically get to take some small part in flying the airplane and to go fly it. Of course, it probably doesn't help Brandon and, like he said, an incredibly talented team up there working on the airplane. And it doesn't help when I show up and I put a little oil on my hands and I come up and I say, "What is this?" and does it come off? And they're like, "Just go away." Truly, we were joking. It was, if you saw Indiana Jones, whenever the kids were getting whipped in the mines, I think it was. These guys were working so hard to get the airplane flying, and it's such a passion. But back to the flying, absolutely. So fortunately, there is one flying airplane that flies for the CAF, and it's flown for many years. And the gentleman that primarily flies it, Ed Vesely's his name. He was nice. He was great. He came up and spent about 3 or 4 days with us and really showed us the nuances of the airplane. So instead of just getting in the airplane and reading the book and figuring it out, he was very helpful and showed us how that airplane flew.
But for you to be able to sit in the airplane and try to take it off, what kind of paperwork is required from the FAA, from et cetera?
Absolutely, for not even just for me to fly it. So Evan had been working on the airplane for the registration of the airplane, just like any of you, I'm sure the majority of you here are pilots. So the airplane has to be registered. The airplane obviously has to be licensed and registered from the FAA. So before you can even get that license to even begin to get checked out in the airplane, a lot of moving parts in that. And obviously the FAA came together with the registration branch. This is within, 2 weeks ago that this kind of started. So for everything to come together and to be here, that led us to the next, having it certified with an airworthiness certificate. A gentleman, Al Kimball, came up, and he was the one that sat there and stared at these guys and came up with everything he had to see to make it be, before I could ever climb in it, to give it an airworthiness certificate. And then he wanted to see it taxi left, he wanted to see it start, he wanted to see it taxi right. Had it up on jacks. We had to do several things to license the airplane. So now we're getting closer. We have a piece of paper that says it can fly. So Ed was nice enough. He did the first flight, and then I was able to fly the rest of the time. But my local FSDO had to issue a letter of authorization to fly the airplane. And again, the airplane itself is very simplistic. But again, like you're saying, this airplane with this configuration has not flown since the late 40s, early 50s. So again, hats off to how well it flew. I mean, we've had so few issues with it. And then after I got some of the time off, then we had to fly in, actually not once, but twice, fly an examiner. Bill Clark had to come from Detroit to come over and watch me fly the airplane. And so literally my license, I think the signature on my license is still wet. That proves that I'm a Helldiver pilot. And and then as soon as we finished that, we put some gas in it and we started it. And here it is. Landed last night. I'm guessing 6:30, 7 o'clock last night. So it's quite a journey.
In that checkout process, I mean, you go up and you do a roll. Do you do a loop? Do you basic handling? Do you stall it? Do you spin it? How basic or how complex is that?
So this is incredible. So you look at this airplane, how big it is, and again, it flies about the way it looks. It's she's a big girl. So, but if you look at the operations limitations in the flight manual, there are very few restrictions on this airplane to include snap rolls, inverted spins, stuff that we're not going to do in current day. But I can imagine the 19-year-old getting into an SB2C and going out there and doing inverted spins in this airplane. But we've done all the so just for weight and balance, and we had so few hours on it. I did do some rolls in the airplane, and it does. It's funny you talk about the ailerons being beefed up to be better. They're just marginally better. So it rolls very slow, but it does roll. So everything we do in the airplane, we will do with probably the exception of any of the inverted spins. But we'll do that so the airplane can do just like, and it will fly and do everything it can do. And when it did as an operational airplane, but yeah, it again, unbelievable airplane. I've already told people it's like a big giant Cub with that just doesn't quite perform as well as a Cub. And
but before you took off, and how much time did you have in one of these?
So right now total about 6.5 hours. So,
okay, but before you jumped in it, you'd never
zero.
flown one of these things, right?
Zero, and people look at that like that's a big deal. Fortunately, having the background to fly in very similar airplanes, I think for the majority, probably any of the other Warbird pilots could probably get in this airplane with a little bit of instruction, and that's what they did in World War II. And of course, ignorance has got me through a lot of flying, which is great, but when you're 19 and you're fearless, I think that's the way it worked. You walked up and you saw an airplane you'd never flown, and they're like, oh, well, let us show you how to fly it, and let me show you how to start it. So I love the stories of, when we could get the stories from guys that would go up and a new airplane would come and land, and they would get in and go fly the airplane and come back, and then they would give their assessment, more of an assessment of how it would be in combat than it would be just as a flyer that we do today. So again, and I can only tell you last night, once I launched for Oshkosh and I had a tailwind, and this, for a big airplane, 170 knots, indicated, and really about 190 true across the ground. It was going pretty good. I think it just wanted to get to Oshkosh, but I was cloud chasing coming in here, and everything just came together. And again, everything had to line up on this to be here. And I think probably a lot of people even sitting here was probably thinking even yesterday that it's probably 50-50 it's going to be sitting here. And so when I touched it down and I knew we were here, it was a great feeling. And again, I really appreciate the Fagens choosing me to fly. There's a lot of other people that probably were in line trying to fly this airplane, so thank you.
How's it land compared to all the other fighters that you've flown? Pretty easy?
I hate to say this, but I haven't made a bad landing in it yet.
Well done.
If you look at the airplane, and that's not I'm not saying that because I'm a good pilot. I'm just saying the airplane takes care of you. It's got a very wide gear. It's a long airplane, and it's designed, really to land hard. So we're not landing on a carrier now. So just a normal landing, the struts extend. When it touches down, the struts compress, and it is just a very smooth landing airplane, I think, just by design. So I'm sure I can make a bad landing in it. If I do, I hope Ron's not watching when I do it. But no, it's just a wonderful airplane all the way around. So far, I haven't found anything that I don't like about it.
Kind of like the F-35, right?
It's just the same technology.
All right, Brandon, question about the restoration. Worst problem that you had during well, I'll just say worst. It may be a time restriction. It may be an equipment. What was the hardest thing for you to put back together on this thing?
So the biggest problem, I guess, was a couple months ago, Ron came to me, and he said, Connie scheduled it for Warbirds in Review, so it has to be there. And then everything...
So it's his fault, is what you're saying.
Everything went out the window after that. No, but really, in all honesty, the Helldiver is system heavy. It's got folding wings. It's got bomb bay. It's got, just the slats and all this stuff. And so really it's just a lot of everything. If you look up under the pilot's floor, there's a little access panel there. There's hydraulic lines running everywhere. There's a hydraulic autopilot system, and like I said, the full.
That didn't work, by the way.
Yeah, no, sorry. But yeah, so it's just the fact that there's so much there with the plane, and there's so many things you have to try to cover during the restoration, and the guys, like Ray said, to finish a restoration this big and start test flying. And I was nervous. Like, I had done what I could, and the shop guys had done what they could. But we don't know what's going to happen during test flying. And a lot of times, even with a simple plane, you run into issues, and you keep rolling through them, and it can end up a month later, and you're still working through issues. Ray went up and flew it, and other than a few little hiccups, I mean, we were actually doing really well. And so just the combination of all that little stuff, we're trying to cover everything in the plane, and then waiting to see what happens when it test flies. It's just a lot of stuff all over the place with this plane. And then the other thing was like the prop stuff, finding that super rare stuff. And just trying to figure out around ways. The brakes on this thing, originally they had a expander tube brake system, and we couldn't find the parts for it, but we didn't want to stray from too authentic. So we actually designed out a new brake body that actually looked like the original expander tube and converted it to a disc brake system that'd be used on something like a TBM or a Corsair. And we kept it as authentic as we could, but we had to vary in that case. And there's certain areas where you try to do what you can, but ultimately availability won't let you.
Okay. We're going to paint some nose art on this thing, Ron? I got to ask. What's the plan there?
I haven't even thought of it yet.
Okay.
That's a good idea, but...
Okay, I was just checking. And Evan, when are you going to fly this thing? Is that in the near future also?
He's going to fly it first.
It depends on when Ray comes and gives us their license, or LOC or whatever.
It's going to live up in Granite Falls, though. That's going to be its home base, and it may make a few air shows here and there, but the plan is to keep it up there, right?
And it'll be in the Navy hangar there, yep.
Yeah, the Navy hangar is absolutely spectacular, by the way. They've modeled it after an actual aircraft carrier, and you walk in. And of course, everything is gray, but yeah. And then the big screen, they've got, how big is the big screen, Ron, on the one wall there? It's a huge.
It's 75 feet.
Okay, yeah.
38 million pixels.
Yeah. So
big.
Yeah, it is impressive. So, all right, we've got about 8 minutes left. So I'm going to open it up, unless you guys, what have I missed? Do we have anything of great significance that we need to talk about?
I'll mention something. If you look up in the bomb bay, and you guys can go over here, anybody can go up there and look in the bomb bay, you won't believe how complicated it is, how many hydraulic lines and electrical. And this thing is about 75% more complicated than the bomb bay of a B-1 bomber.
Yep, I flew the
Too many engineers worked on it.
And I got to say that's probably correct, but it's also a lot cleaner than the Bombay and a B-1 bomber. You can't believe. Take a look when you're done. Come take a look at the workmanship, the attention to detail that this airplane's got, and it is absolutely spectacular. All the safety wires. I mean, everything. To me, it's an award winner. There's no question in my mind. And yeah, it is an absolutely gorgeous airplane. So yeah, I'm going to stop now. Like I said, we got about 7 minutes now. So let's open it up to questions. And I'm sure we're going to have some questions on this airplane.
One easy question. The ordnance under the wing looks great. Where do you get those? Is there Rockets R Us or something?
Yeah, so there's actually a company out there, Bombs Away, and they do replica bombs and rockets and various other items. You can call them up if you want a rocket for your man cave or a bomb for your kitchen. call them up and order it.
Okay.
Melissa, we need one of those, a bomb for the kitchen.
All right, sir, go ahead.
What size engine is, what manufacturer, what size engine, and will either of these planes be flying between now and Saturday during the show?
So the engine on the Helldiver is 2600. Yep. Yep.
And
That 2800 Pratt and Whitney. Yep.
What about flying in the show?
Flying in the show.
flying, I don't think there's neither of them are going to be flying in the show. So no, they are not.
They're not scheduled to fly in the show. We may do it. We're gonna, when we leave out of here, we're probably gonna do a photo shoot for EAA with the airplanes on the way out. But right now, we didn't really plan on this airplane. Was may or may not have got here, so we didn't make it. You hate to put it on the poster and then not show up with the airplane. So yeah, we hope you see it. Hope to fly when we go
Saw a
out.
hand over here.
Yeah.
Is that you?
Yeah.
You could see
All right, next. There's one right there.
So you mentioned that the one on the right here was slow to climb. I was just curious, how slow is slow? What kind of sustained climb do you have on a cruise climb?
Well, it's just slower like than the Mustang or the Corsair, the only planes I've flown with. I mean, it's a great performing airplane. It's just compared to a Mustang or a Corsair, they got to give you a few inches. So, I'd have to ask Ray to slow her down a bit. We're climbing, what are we climbing at about,
It's still pretty impressive,
Yeah.
but when you look at it in the lens to some of the other airplanes like a P-51, and then if you're in a Bearcat or something like that, you would say a P-51 is not a very good climbing airplane. So it just depends what you're flying with. But when you think about what the wing is designed to do, which is really go really fast, so it's kind of hard to have a wing that climbs really well, but will also do 500-ish miles an hour. So it's a great balance, and it's just a heavy airplane, really. So. We don't fly them with the bombs, and we don't get to fly them at the combat weights now. So I cannot imagine, the guys that took off with a full load of fuel and bombs in World War II. I'm sure it took, just like the bombers, it takes a long time to get where you want to go.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Do you have a man-hour restoration requirement on the Helldiver? How long did you guys spend on it?
No.
Don't you get paid by the hour? You don't. Oh, you don't get paid by the hour.
It'd be nice to be paid by the hour. The last couple months, the guys have been pounding out the hours. I mean, we were working 80 to 100-hour weeks, and it's just. And over the years, when the project initially started, it was kind of part-time, on and off. We do some stuff, and so yeah, really, I'm sure Ron has someone that kept track of the hours, and I don't want to hear that number. But no, the guys just in the last few months have really been putting in the hours and to get it here. And that's one of the big things for us. The Fagens, they have these planes restored and make sure they're done right, and they enjoy bringing them to shows like this and allowing people to see how these planes were originally, and as a shop we try to make sure we're doing it as close as we can possibly get it with the information we have. It's one of those things like almost like archaeology. You dig into it. Funny thing, Evan the other day was helping putting stencils on the plane, and I looked over and I saw he had put one of the aromatic fuel stencils on the door, and I stared at it for a minute, and I said, "Oh," and he goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, "No, I was just checking the stencil because one of the fuel doors had aromatic spelt wrong, and I was worried you had put it on the wrong door." And it's stuff like that we pay attention to and try to get right, just because I want people to know in 50 years, if they're restoring this plane or using it for a reference, that this is how Curtis did it, and try to represent that the best we can.
And oh, by the way, your guys are the guys who are keeping all those other airplanes flying too, right?
Yes, yeah.
And how many are, Ron, how many are there that they got to keep flying? I know, hey, P-38s, Mustangs, Hellcats, how many?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. all right.
I bet Diane knows.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, sir. Oh, wait. Crew. The crew on the S2? Okay. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, there's two crew in there, the pilot in front, and then there's a gunner and navigator in the back. And his primary mission was defending the back end of the plane. But a neat thing with the Helldiver, so when it went on a dive bomb raid or dive bomb attack, so they're doing 270 knots at a 70-degree angle in those dive runs. And so at that point, the rear gunner, navigator, he turns into a safety check guy, and he's got an altimeter in there. And he's watching this altimeter just go like this, and he's screaming out numbers to the pilot because the pilot is doing nothing but looking at his bomb target. And so he needs to know that if he's not pulling out at 3,000 feet, they're not going to make it. And so that guy is constantly screaming out the numbers, making sure he knows. And it's just one of those weird things you kind of learn when you're going through the stuff and reading about the history on them. So it's one of the fun aspects of these restorations.
Any plan to, we talked about the rockets. Any plan to put a gun in the back? Are you going to do that?
Yeah, we actually have a gun that's here. And unfortunately, our main goal was to get the plane to the show so people could see it. Excuse me. And our gun, we're missing the handles for it. So if anyone has handles for a twin 30 caliber machine gun, I'd really love them. But anyway, and so we didn't want to represent that unfinished. It's just part of the thing. If it's not in there, it's not in there, but we don't want to have partially finished stuff up there. So it just was one of those things where eventually we'll have all that stuff in, and I know after this we've got other projects to work on, but I'll probably have to sneak in late at night to even do more to it, so
okay.
Ron doesn't know I'm dragging away from other projects.
Okay. Go ahead,
mention
Ron.
something. Ed, is it's very important that these young, fortunately for us, our mechanics are all young, and that is great for the future. And the Helldiver here was our last Warbird restoration.
Sure,
We're
I don't
lucky
believe
enough.
that. I'm sorry, but I
we're
just don't
retired
believe
from
it.
the Warbirds after this. But now Evan here loves the Warbird business, and he's taken the reins to keep the Warbirds going, and so we encourage young people to start training and primary trainers and basic trainers and move into the fighters and that because it's enjoyable. And so I got Evan, we got Dax over there by the Mustang. So we got to keep these young people learning how to fly these airplanes and work on them. So
Yep.
that's wonderful.
And I will ask, other maintainers, do you have some other maintainers in the audience who helped build this thing? Get them to stand up.
Yeah.
We want to say thanks.
Tyler, Dax, where's Squirt?
Come on, guys. There's one in the back. There we go.
There you go. And we got one on the road yet, and the other guy is still at home sleeping.
Okay. And I wanted to get back to, we were talking a little bit about the back cockpit and the gun and all that kind of stuff. I got to ask, there's a tube back there. If you just sit there and look, and there's a rather large tube. I think I know the answer. What's that tube for?
Yeah, so basically they had a survival kit and a life raft in there. And so if they ditched in the ocean, they dropped 2 pins, and they could pull the life raft out and get their survival kit out and get floating and hopefully be rescued soon. And that's the other thing too, that, doing this kind of stuff, you learn, and it kind of blows your mind because, these guys were, a lot of them were country kids, that never been out of their own county. And all of a sudden they're going to flight training, and then they're shipped overseas to a strange place, or they're on a ship. And these guys went out on missions over the ocean with no reference at all, middle of the ocean. They're just navigating, and to take a young kid and the changes that were going on for those guys back then to do that is just something that amazes me so much. And I just can't even fathom.
There was a story, I can't remember where I read it, about, I think it was the Battle of Philippine Sea, where they launched these things at max range, and then they lost they lost like over. You familiar with the story?
I've read it. It's been a few years, but I remember. Yeah, and taking off, they knew that
they probably weren't going to make it back.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, and it was their job, and they just did it.
How about after World War II? They parked a lot of these things, but did they continue at all beyond that? Did they go Korea or anything like that?
Honestly, not as far as I know. They were relegated to training for a while, and then got slowly surpassed by other planes. Most of them were, being used for training into maybe the early 50s, and then they slowly were scrapping them out or, putting them into museums like Smithsonian and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions out there? Let's see. Oh, there's one right there.
Yeah, on the 47, is the turbo operational, and if so, how much of flying the airplane is just managing the turbo?
Well, this one still works, but the wastegates are wired open. So basically, when you're taxiing around and stuff, you can hear the turbo. And when we get to where we're going, we got to check the turbo oil. And, we don't use it to go high altitudes or anything like that. So, but this one does have a functional turbo.
Interesting enough, there's very little bag space in this airplane. So when we came over here, I had my bags back there. So I wanted to make sure Evan didn't open the doors in flight, so all my bags would have came flying out, including my. So it's actually a great place to, which I wouldn't even have known, but a great place to haul a bag. So, but most of them are disconnected just because we don't need them to go to altitude anymore.
As I remember, didn't you lose a flight jacket out of the back of a P-51 also?
That's a whole other story, yes.
Yeah, I know he lost one of those, but he found it again. That's the good news. So, any other questions out? Okay, we got one up there.
Is this particular paint scheme, is this part representative of any particular group or carrier wing?
Yeah,
or going to
basically it's marked up in the Essex markings, and the planes on there would have had the double diamond on the tail and on the wing, and then they would have had a ship number too on it to identify which plane it was. When we right now just have the Essex markings on it, just to give it. I really like the look of it, and our Hellcat is actually painted in the same markings, so we kind of wanted to keep them the same.
Thank you.
Did it ever shoot anything down? Did it ever have any kind of air-to-air kills?
Yeah, and actually,
there was actually one that had 3 kills, shot down 3 zeros.
Wow.
Dogfighting, not from the rear gunner. And Ed, who was Ray's friend that was up, said there was several that had single kills. So, I mean, they actually dogfight and had victories.
Wow. Impressive. Other questions? There's one up here first, okay.
Is there any thought of putting the Curtis Electric on the Thunderbolt, or how do you like it?
Well, I don't know if Bernie's around, but Bernie, flies the other P-47 that's got a Curtis Electric, and he says their airplane climbs like crazy with the Curtis Electric. It's got a different nose case on it. I think, Ray, tell me if I'm wrong, this is the same prop as the Corsair, the F4 or Dash 4 we fly. And he said Bernie told me that causes this to climb a little bit slower and be more of a land lover, but I don't think we have plans anywhere, at least in the near term, to do that. Maybe someday, but I don't think right now.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we got another one down here, but he doesn't have a mic yet. So hold on, and we'll get a mic to you so we can. Where's our mic? It's coming down. Just be patient for a second. Yeah, right there in between.
Yeah, hi, great job. Beautiful work. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Was the 47 used in North Africa or Sicily or Italy?
Yeah, they were used in Italy.
Okay. What about North Africa?
Maybe towards the end of the North Africa campaign, I think they were used, but they did do a lot of fighting in Italy, all the way to the end.
Yeah, I think a lot of the groups transitioned out of P-40s into the P-47
Right.
once they got towards moving into Italy. And
Okay, thanks.
What kind of fuel flow we got on this thing? How much are you burning in an hour?
So we plan it really at about 75 gallons an hour. And it's like anything else with a new engine, we're still trying to sort that out. But virtually the same engine that's in a B-25. So obviously with a few changes being a dive bomber. But yeah, so just to be conservative, we round that up to 80 and use 80 an hour. And it's probably a pretty good number.
And what's it hold? How many gallons?
355 gallons. So, okay. And that's obviously without external drop tank. So it has a fuselage tank. And then there's 2 tanks interconnected within the wings, and both of those give us 150. So 300 in the wings, and then another 55 gallons in the fuselage tank. So a fair amount of fuel without, extended range for drop tanks and whatnot. So it gets you pretty long ways.
Okay. All right. Another question.
Right over here.
Okay, we got one over here.
So regarding the P-47 or the Helldiver and the technology used in them, is there anything that's really kind of revolutionary or stuff that carried through into future versions of aircraft? Or is, either the Helldiver or P-47 like one time we're not going to do that again kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a design question more than anything else.
Yeah, it's and you can jump in on this. Obviously, a lot of the airplanes you see are really kind of late 30s technology. So, I mean, really, it was such a move, by the end of the war. You look at the B-29 with the revolutionary pressurization and obviously all the invents of the turbine-powered and the jets that were coming online. So, it's amazing. You look at a B-17, and I'm so respectful for the guys that we get in a non-pressurized airplane and fly at 30,000 feet, with a heated suit. I mean, it's so I would say there's probably not a whole lot that carries forward on this airplane with the obviously in the knowledge to build better systems and more reliable systems for hydraulics. But these are the great thing is they're as complicated as they are from an operator standpoint, and I do make fun of the Navy every chance I get being an Air Force guy, but Navy really did a nice job of making it very pilot-proof, and making the systems understandable and making it, for the operators, which is, so hats off for that.
yeah, one thing I would add is, so in the cockpit, now that Ray's talking about it, the cockpit on this Helldiver, so they had -1, -1C, -3, -4, -4E, -5. This is a -5, and all the earlier versions of the Helldiver had pedestals everywhere with, your bomb controls on this pedestal, and your bomb bay doors are in this bracket, and just everything was everywhere on a pedestal. By the -5, they started doing a more modern layout that carried into even modern jets today. And it's consoles that are quick change consoles, and like this one up here is your switch panel, and this one back here is your radio panel, and over here you have all your hydraulic controls, on this. And so they did revisions like that they learned things from pilots and put them into the planes, and that's something that I'm glad we have a -5 for that, because the cockpit is laid out pretty nice and everything is where it should be for the most part.
Mm-hmm. How about G loadings on these things? According to the book, I know you're not going to pull a lot of Gs now, they're old airplanes, but back then, yeah, they dive at the ground at 70 degrees and they go boom. What were they pulling? 5 Gs, 6 Gs?
I'm told that you could pull as hard as you wanted on this airplane pretty much. It's an incredible structure. The spar structure, I mean, and I don't think it would be uncommon for them to do 7, 8, even 9 Gs probably in a pullout and not damage this airplane. That's how well it is built, which is just hard to imagine. Now, obviously, it wouldn't sustain that for very long, but if it's you hitting the ground versus you pulling back, and that's hence the safety valve in the back seat that was keeping people from hitting the ground on these dives. But yeah, it's built to pull. This airplane is built to pull quite a few Gs. And again, read the flight manual. You're like, wow, I can't believe an airplane of this size can do what it does and how well it's built.
How about any inverted restrictions or anything like that? You fly upside down for a while?
It does say inverted, obviously, only for entering at a dive. So, yeah, you can go inverted, but you can't sustain inverted. You can go inverted to roll into a dive. But, again, there's other issues for fuel and for oil. You would starve your engine of oil, so you don't want to do that.
Okay. All right. Other questions out here? None.
Yeah, can I say something?
Oh, wait. We got a young lady right here. We'll get your microphone. Here she comes right now.
Well, we're waiting on the mic to go over there. Everybody here loves Warbirds in Review. I mean, we come here every year because we love Warbirds in Review. And who's responsible for Warbirds in Review and keeping it going is Miss Connie Bullen right there. And she and her ex-husband, or not her ex-husband, but Ed that passed away, were responsible. And Connie's staff here is amazing, every one of them. And Ed, it's just amazing what you give all of us people. And wasn't for you guys, it'd be pretty boring around here.
One more right there, and I think we're going to wrap it up after that.
Great job. Did they put Helldivers on floats?
Actually, so there was a Dash 2 Helldiver prototype that they had a huge set of Edo floats for, and that project, they must have originally ordered like 1,000 of those or something, and then got the first 2 built and decided that it wasn't needed. But there are still floats floating around for that Helldiver. We've had over the years a few guys that said, hey, we've got these floats, they're for a Helldiver, you want to buy them? And I mean, it'd make a nice lake home plane, but no, and the floats carried like 400 extra gallons of fuel. It's just a massive setup, but they never went into production.
Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up then. Thank you. And I got to say, thanks, yeah, thanks to all these guys. Brandon, your restoration job, superior. And the guys that were standing up out there, hey, spectacular. As I said, I'm hoping that Saturday night you're going to walk away with some trophy because it's well deserved. And Ron, I got to say, Ron and Diane both, I can't say enough. Yeah, you know, we had a similar father-son act somewhat this morning. We had Eric and his son Luke, you know, and you're passing it along, and that's what we need to do. And that's obviously what you're doing. And Evan, thank you for picking up the reins and running with it because you're
He's already got 3 projects.
Yep, there you go. See, he's got them progged, but I say thank you. But
what's Mustang is next, P-51.
All right, so now we know, another P-51. Well, you've already got 2, 1.
Well, it's to a customer, so it won't be ours.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yep.
Well, anyway, I say thank you to all you guys, and I appreciate the hard work. I appreciate, Ray, you bringing it in here last night. Boy, we were all crossing our fingers and just watching on Flight Aware going, yeah, all right, he's down. They left it over in the Weeks hangar yesterday, put on the rockets, and it is absolutely spectacular. So thank you, folks. Oh, my last, and I do this on every one of my presentations, veterans. I would like the veterans, active duty, to stand so we can say thank you. Thank you for your service. So veterans, please rise. All right, folks, these guys are going to be down here for a little while, so if you've got some questions, and take a look at both these airplanes. But yeah, this one in particular, it just finished. They're spectacular. So thanks. Tomorrow morning, we've got another show that starts at 10 o'clock.